What is good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode brought to you by the League FFB. Today, we're doing our final divisional breakdown for Dynasty Fantasy Football. We are going to be talking about the AFC West. So the Chargers, the Raiders, the Chiefs, and the Broncos, we got you covered here. Everything you need to know for Dynasty Fantasy Football, breakouts, busts, sleepers, all of that good stuff. This is an episode of Let's Talk Dynasty, so it would not be an episode of Let's Talk Dynasty without my co-host MFGDs. So let's get him into the building and let's start talking about the AFC West. Man, I will tell you, it's pretty hard for me not to just go into let's start talking about these dynasty trades. It almost comes right off the tongue every time.
I know, man, but here it is, man. Last divisional breakdown. It's the final countdown.
Let's go, man. All right, so AFC West on tap. Let's go right into the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, last year, 4-13, fourth in the AFC West. They are projected to win 6.5 games this year, so a little bit of an improvement. Changes all across the board here in Las Vegas. Former Seattle Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll was hired to be the new head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, and Chip Kelly was brought in to be the new offensive coordinator after winning a national championship with Ohio State. They lose Gardner Minshew. They lose Alexander Madison. Don't think those were key pieces to the team, but those are some of the departures that they had. Geno Smith, Ashton, Jeanty, Jack Bech, Dante Thornton, and Raheem Mostert were brought in as additions under this new regime here in Las Vegas. When I'm looking at the top 250, you're looking at guys like Brock Bowers, Ashton Jeanty, Jacoby Myers, Geno Smith, Jack Bech, Dante Thornton, Michael Mayer, and Trey Tucker. I think there's lots of interesting conversations to be had. Obviously, this team does have a lot of top-heavy assets. You see Bowers and Jeanty there in the top 15 dynasty assets, and then the next best guy is 111. So it is top-heavy here in Las Vegas. Let's start the conversation off, though, with the wide receiver room outside there in Las Vegas. I guess Jacoby, Thornton, Bech, Tucker. What do you like? What do you dislike about this wide receiver room?
Well, they definitely don't have, a who's who of wide receivers there. They got Jacoby Myers, which, at best on a team that's actually like good, you could a generous placement for Jacoby Myers would be wide receiver too. He's not a bum by any stretch of the imagination. It's just that he's definitely not a wide receiver one, which is what he's being used as. I guess the hope would be that Jack Bech or Dante Thornton surprise people and he becomes, one of them becomes like a stud. But then again, at the same time, if you think about how Pete Carroll likes his rosters built and things of that nature, you would assume that, the Seahawks never had, like, in their heyday, they didn't have like a super stud wide receiver. And it's funny, it seems like the minute they did get guys like DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett, even though I guess, Tyler Lockett, they kind of weren't the Seahawks anymore. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but this team is built the way it's built. Just because they don't have a top receiver, I don't think it means that they're for sure gonna like be trash on offense, because the offense under Pete Carroll isn't really about the wide receivers. And I will also say that they do have a bona fide, solidified, super tight end on their team that's almost like could play as their wide receiver one. And they even have a backup tight end that many people thought was going to be, an elite tight end as their backup. So, there is ways around that wide receiver room, but no, they don't have a top wide receiver, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going to say the wide receiver one here is Brock Bowers. That's just where the price is at. That's what he's going to be. I agree with you, man. I think Jacoby Myers, he's a guy that's a flex play, for us in fantasy, maybe a wide receiver 3-ish play for us most weeks. But the reality is the ceiling for a guy like Jacoby Myers is really not that, it's not that exciting. He's the player where, everybody always says Jacoby's so undervalued. And I agree, but it's because when you are playing fantasy, there's guys that are floor plays and there's guys that are ceiling plays. And more often than not, you're going to rank the ceiling play guys over the floor plays because you want that week winning potential. You want that week winning upside out of a guy in your lineup. Jacoby doesn't do that, but Jacoby will give you 10 damn points every week. That's what Jacoby will do for you. So if you need, a floor play in your lineup, he's fine. But I think this is a interesting roster outside of that. Besh was kind of the guy that people were clamoring about. He was dominating the Senior Bowl, got some good draft capital, but it feels like Besh has, at least in training camp and some of the preseason, been working primarily behind Donta Thornton, who is playing as the starter on the outside. So it feels like Thornton and Myers are the guys in 2 wide receiver sets. Besh has been behind him. Tucker to me is kind of just like a special teamer guy. I'm not too worried about him for the most part in fantasy, but Thornton is very interesting to me as a kind of a sleeper dart throw kind of guy, because if he's working in wide receiver, 2 wide receiver sets as the starting X on the outside with Geno, we've seen Geno, use the deep ball and stuff like that to guys like DK. Like, could Thornton be what maybe Pete Carroll views as like his next project? Because keep in mind, DK wasn't like a complete wide receiver coming to the NFL. He was viewed as a project. There's a reason he fell to the second round. Could Thornton be that guy for Pete Carroll? Maybe. He's intriguing to me, but the wide receiver position for the most part, it's best you have him, you draft him in Dynasty, you keep him, see what happens. Myers is a floor play. Thornton's interesting, and the real wide receiver one here is Brock Bowers.
Yeah, that sounds spot on to me, man.
All right, well, let's talk about, I guess really the only other thing that I really want to talk about is Geno and Jeanty. So let's talk about Geno, because we do have the wide receivers here that is a little bit of a hodgepodge of guys. People have pointed out the narrative that Geno has never used a tight end and Pete Carroll has never used a tight end. I don't think that matters when you have a guy like Brock Bowers. Very rarely do you ever have a guy like Brock Bowers who plays as a wide receiver. So are you worried about the narrative there? And do you think Geno has the ability to kind of have a bounce back year now that he's reunited with Pete Carroll in Las Vegas?
I was one of the people who brought up that Pete Carroll and Geno never used the tight end. But I also think it has to be Pete Carroll, for all his infinite wisdom, he has to know that he needs to utilize Brock Bowers. Like, if he doesn't utilize Brock Bowers, then that is like malpractice of coaching. He's going to have to use him. So that's how I feel about that narrative. If Pete Carroll's not using Brock Bowers, then that means that the game has simply passed him by. So Geno, you just can't really sell me on being high on G and Geno. I wrote him off. I didn't write back. I was just done with Geno. Reuniting him with Pete Carroll, we'll see how that goes. I can't say I'm super confident. I mean, lightning usually doesn't strike in the same place twice. So we'll see on that.
They're in Las Vegas now.
Yeah, I know. They right in the backyard. I know.
It's a different place now. It struck once in Seattle. Can it strike twice in Las Vegas?
Maybe, man. We'll see though. I got to see it to believe it. I think this team is all about the running back. It's all about the running back, and it's going to be about if they can get their defense up to snuff. And I think those are pretty much the players that are going to drive this thing. Brock Bowers, pray to God that he's used the right way. Jeanty, running people over, defense. Geno should just only have to manage the game. And as long as he can do that, then we'll see what happens.
We'll see. I think Geno's a little bit of a value at our quarterback 29. I think you can plug him on a contending roster and still be fine. But you're right. This offense is going to run through Jeanty. Jeanty, obviously the coveted running back prospect of this year's 2025 class, lands with the Raiders. The offensive line is a work in progress currently, but I think a lot of people have high hopes for Ashton Jeanty. I was on record earlier in the offseason saying when he was going in the first round of underdog drafts and things like that, I wasn't a fan. I didn't like clicking him over guys like HN. I didn't like clicking him over guys like CMC for 2025 scoring purposes. He has now fallen to the second round of drafts, so the ADP has come down in single season formats, and I'm all in. I like it. I like where he's at that cost. I know some people are going to say that's so minuscule of a difference between, the late first and the second rounds, the early seconds, but it's the players you were having to pass over. You were having to pass over a Drake London, Brian Thomas, an Amon-Ra St. Brown. You were going to have to pass over a Devon Achane, things like that. Like, I wasn't passing over those players to draft Jeanty, but I will pass over Lad McConkey to draft Ashton Jeanty. I will pass over Jonathan Taylor to draft Ashton Jeanty. So I like where we're at. It's going to be interesting to see. Don't get too nervous with Jeanty if it starts a little slow. That's going to be my only thing I'm going to say. We got the highlight, the people wanted to say a little bit of a beast quake, a mini beast quake, because we saw Marshawn do that with Pete Carroll in Seattle. We had that in the preseason game. Jeanty is going to be, I think it's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, a tiny bit, but overall, I still think Jeanty Jeanty's going to be a dominant running back for years to come.
Yeah, man. Yes. I mean, so far from the little micro size sample we got for Jeanty in this preseason, we're seeing exactly what we want to see as far as like his play style and how he's going to run angry runs. So I think we'll see, man. I think if any, honestly, I'll be completely honest. If Jeanty got drafted to like a different team outside of the Raiders, I think a lot of people would be like, even higher on him. But it's kind of just like one of those things. If you slap a Raiders, Bears, Browns logo on the helmet, people just assume failure. So we'll see.
Yeah, it's crazy to me that there were people panic selling and calling him a bust after a preseason game where he had 3 carries for -1 yards, and everybody was like, well, this ain't the Mountain West, buddy. This is a wrap for you. Yeah, I don't know if we can make judgments that quickly. As you say, sometimes patience is a virtue. Let's go on to the next team. The next team that I got here, the Denver Broncos. Last year, 10-7, finished 3rd place in the AFC West. Lost to the Buffalo Bills in the wild card round. This year, they're projected a win total of 9.5 games. No coaching changes. It's still sleazy old Sean Payton. Offensive departures, you have Javonte Williams and Josh Reynolds who have left this team. And their additions, they get RJ Harvey in the NFL draft, Evan Engram from the Jacksonville Jaguars. J.K. Dobbins is in town as well with Pat Bryant out of Illinois. Looking at the top 250 in ADP for them, you got Bo Nix at the top of the board, followed by RJ Harvey, Courtland Sutton, Evan Engram, Marvin Mims, J.K. Dobbins, Pat Bryant, and my guy Troy Franklin sitting there at the bottom just hanging on to a thread. When I look at this team, it's funny because the conversation feels somewhat similar, obviously a little bit more positive, but somewhat similar to the Raiders, where you have a clear receiving option in Courtland Sutton. Obviously, the clear receiving option there is Brock Bowers. Then you have a secondary option that's going to be solid, the Jacoby Myers and the Evan Engram. But outside of that, Marvin Mims, Pat Bryant, Troy Franklin. Who are the guys here, man? How do we shake up this wide receiver room? What do you look at it and think there might be value to be had? Is there value to be had? I mean, talk to me about this receiving core.
Actually, I have a very hot take, man. I have a hot take. I think that I don't know, I can't tell you which one is going to be, dude. But between Mims, Bryant, and Franklin, one of those guys are going to end up rising up to be the best wide receiver on this team.
They're going to surpass Courtland Sutton.
Yeah.
Wow. That is a hot take.
It's a hot take, man. It's a hot take. And it's because Courtland Sutton isn't your typical, like, okay, I kind of have to go into other parts of the team in order to explain it. Okay. Bo Nix, I think Bo Nix could hit another gear. I think for what he did in his rookie season, I think that there's an additional level he can go. I don't know how high the level is, but I do know it can go an additional level. He can do even more than what he did.
I agree.
Courtland Sutton, I don't see Courtland Sutton as the prototypical wide receiver one. Like, he isn't a guy that you're going to look up there and, like, put him next to, like, guys like A.J. Brown and stuff like that. Like, right. I think what this wide receiver group needs more than anything is development. And I don't think we've seen the best of Marvin Mims. I don't think we haven't seen Pat Bryant at all. And Troy Franklin, I don't know what the hell happened, but Troy Franklin, I feel like he's kind of been written off for dead a little too quickly.
And for what it's worth, they've said that he's having a good camp this offseason. Franklin's having a good camp is what they said.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I think the true wide receiver one position is wide open to me because we already know what Courtland Sutton brings to the table. Like, I can't sit here and honestly say that Mims, Brown, or Franklin won't end up being better than Courtland Sutton ever because I don't think Courtland Sutton, like, they people are drafted. His ADP is 84. He's being drafted as 34th wide receiver. Like that's how people are viewing him. Mm-hmm. So it's not like he's like this unsurpassable person or wide receiver. And as Bo Nix goes, so is the other guys gonna go. You don't think Bo Nix is like desperately wishing that he could elevate Troy Franklin? I'm sure he is. I'm sure he wishes he could do that. So I mean, we'll see. And if my bold take comes to pass, then you could very well be looking at a league winner out of one of those 3 wide receivers. Because those guys are definitely getting drafted later in drafts.
So I'm going to ask you a similar question to what you asked me. with the 49ers in the last episode, you have to pick one today for your dynasty roster, and you can't change your stance. You only get to add one of them to your dynasty roster, and you have to live with your decision. Which is the one you're picking?
I'm picking probably Pat Bryant.
Okay. I would pick Mims. Mims would be my selection.
And no, I'm not picking Pat Bryant because he went to Illinois. That's not why I'm picking Pat Bryant.
I didn't even think about it, but
like what was Pat Bryant's draft capital? What's the draft capital of all three of these guys? Troy Franklin was like what? He was like
Troy was a 4th rounder. Pat Bryant was a 3rd rounder, and I think Mims was a 2nd rounder.
Okay, so draft capital definitely is in favor of Marvin Mims.
But Mims wasn't drafted by this regime.
Right. So that's also something I'm taking into consideration.
Yeah.
I would say third round draft capital is still significant draft capital. Like
yeah, I mean, for wide receivers, really, you want to see guys get drafted in the top 50, which does cut off that 2nd round. But we've had guys, I mean, every year you have guys that go later than that. We've had the Nakuas, we've had the Amon-Ra St. Browns, we've had all of these guys who get drafted later and still produce.
I think it has a lot to do, too, with Pat Bryant being the first top receiver that this regime drafted. He's the highest drafted receiver of this regime, and that's why I picked him. That's why I picked him. So,
fair enough.
And plus it's so the mystery of him being a rookie, too. So
yeah, that probably plays into it as well. Look, when I'm looking at this wide receiver room too, I kind of agree there is probably some value to be had. All of these guys are definitely worthy of stashing on the end of a bench, putting on a taxi squad. I agree with you there where you want to have probably one of these guys just even in the case of injury. If there's injury, somebody's going to have to step up, right? So I like that. Sutton, I do believe is the number one. I don't see one of these guys surpassing him. I don't think the wide receiver one, I don't think the talent is on the roster to surpass Sutton. Maybe next year in the NFL draft or 2027 in the NFL draft. But you're right. These guys are going to go as Bo goes. So I think there's definitely another level for him to hit as well. I really like him as a player. I'm growing more and more and more on Bo Nix as like it gets further. What are we laughing for?
Because the more he elevates and the more I just can't stop thinking about that YouTuber that pounded
said he
the
was
table.
the best in the draft.
Yeah, like
yeah.
like he's not he initially I thought that guy was completely insane, but he's becoming less insane by each passing day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's still guys like Daniels and May and stuff in this class, but I like Bo. I think he's solid. Yep, Caleb too. But look, man, I think the number 2 wide receiver is Evan Engram. I think Evan Engram is going to be a dark horse candidate here to be a top 5 tight end. I like what he does after the catch. I think he can get a lot of receptions. We've seen Sean Payton have these joker tight ends before. I love Evan Engram as a value in drafts, and I think he's very sneaky. You seem like you don't like it.
Yeah, you know me. I'm anti Evan Engram.
Yeah, it's because you got burned in like 2016 or something.
Yeah.
You're holding the grudge.
He's on my shit list ever since, yeah.
I think he's undervalued, and I think he's going to produce very handsomely for fantasy football teams this year. I'd be buying him at a discount. Let's talk about the only part of the team that we haven't really talked about at this point in time. It's the running back room. RJ Harvey, kind of a dynasty darling for most people after the NFL draft, gets that 2nd round draft capital. Was surprising. I don't think a lot of people expected him to sneak into the 2nd round, but Sean Payton calls his shot on Harvey. J.K. Dobbins also gets brought in to kind of be another guy in this backfield. I'm interested to hear your thoughts and your takes on the backfield in general, because at a time earlier in the offseason, you said if JK signs, he's going to be involved and it's going to hurt Harvey. And I think a lot of people gave you some shit for that take. It was the Harvey maniac, but I agree to an extent. I'm going to give you the floor here because Dobbins and Harvey, it happened, and I'm interested to hear your takes going into 2025.
In the league that we're in together, I have Harvey and Dobbins on the roster. Currently, at this present time, I'm starting Dobbins. And from my opinion, until that inevitable injury happens to J.K. Dobbins, I think J.K. Dobbins will be the starting running back for this team. I do think R.J. Harvey will be involved in the passing game. I do think he will be involved, period. But as for who comes out into the field first, I think it's going to be J.K. Dobbins. And then at some point, J.K. Dobbins will have his inevitable injury, and then the rest will be history because J.K. Dobbins will be out, and then you'll have something like R.J. Harvey being spelled by Jaleel McLaughlin or Estime or some shit like that. So that's just where I am on it. Yes, Harvey is the 2nd most valuable dynasty asset on this team. Yes, Harvey will be a stud. Yes to all those things, but I'm telling you now, the scumbag Sean Payton could give two shits about what you guys want and when you guys want it, and he's gonna start the old veteran and have him out there. He's gonna let the tread on those tires run out before he brings the Lamborghini out of the garage. So
yeah, I like Harvey as kind of this undervalued asset pre-NFL draft. And then the draft capital and the landing spot were so good and so out of the ordinary of what I had projected for Harvey, because if people were around the channel, I deemed Denver as the best running back landing spot for anybody. Whoever landed here got the best landing spot for fantasy. And then second round draft capital was just not what I expected. I would have loved for this to be the Trevion Henderson landing spot, or for this to be the Quinshon Judkins landing spot, or the Hampton landing spot. It wasn't. So I'd be lying to you if I said I wasn't at least monitoring RJ Harvey's market value over the next couple of months, because if it gets crazy, if it gets out of a certain tier, he's not in that tier yet, by the way. I would explore moving out of Harvey, because I think he is very intriguing, and he was a player that I had, my eyes on, but I didn't think he was like a bona fide smash, type of prospect. I didn't think he was like a guaranteed stud. It's just everything elevated him, and he had good tape. But like, if I got to a point where I could move Harvey for a Jonathan Taylor, or I could move Harvey for a Kyron Williams, or I could move Harvey for even a Chase Brown, I think I'd do it. But I think really what I would like to do with Harvey is just go laterally to a different position, because when you get into that tier of player, if I can move out of Harvey and get to a guy like Egbuka, Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Romo Dunze, if I can get out of him and go to one of those guys, I would do it. And it would have to take RJ Harvey breaking out and hitting the scene hard for him to get into that tier, I think. But it's not out of the range of outcomes. I like Harvey. I think Dobbins will be involved, probably annoyingly involved for RJ Harvey managers at first. But I think ultimately this is RJ Harvey's backfield to win. And that would be the way that I would be operating with it. But like I said, I'd be monitoring RJ Harvey, because if people start getting hot and bothered, I'd be okay exploring a move out.
Yeah. If that value gets too high, you got to do it. Take advantage of the market.
Yeah. I have him on a rebuilding roster. I drafted him in the early second. It's a 10-team league, so it's basically like the 112, 111. But I have him in one rebuilding league. And I think if somebody came to me where he starts out hot and they're like, take a first and 2 seconds, I'm out. You can take the first and 2 seconds. You can have Harvey.
Yeah, go ahead and go. I'll pack his bag.
Yeah, so that's just not an indictment on Harvey. We'll talk about him later, but I think the market could overreact to him a little bit. Whether it's playing drafts or sweating pick'ems, there's no offseason on Underdog, which means there's still plenty of ways to cash in big this summer. No matter the sport you're watching, Underdog has you covered, and all you have to do is pick higher or lower on your favorite athletes from whatever sport. Put them into a pick'em entry, watch the winning multiplier increase, click play, and win real cash. So what are you waiting for? Download Underdog and start playing today. Plus, when you use promo code LEAGUEFFB, Underdog will give you a new customer special, which is a free square for your first pick'em entry, and they will give you up to $1,000 in bonus cash, giving you the perfect head start to winning big on Underdog. So if you want to support our show and get in on some daily fantasy sports action, click the link in our description to sign up for Underdog using code LEAGUEFFB. So thank you to our sponsors over at Underdog. And with that out of the way, let's get back into the action. Let's go on to the next team. Got the jersey on, the Los Angeles Chargers. Projected win total of 9.5 games. Last year, they went 11-6. They finished second in the AFC West and lost to the Houston Texans in the wild card round. No coaching changes for this staff. In the offseason, they lose J.K. Dobbins, like we just talked about, Joshua Palmer, and Gus Edwards. But they added a ton of talent on this team as well. Omarion Hampton, the big name that came in, Trey Harris, Najee Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith, Tyler Conklin, Aronde Gadsden, and their good old friend Keenan Allen shows back up in town to maybe finish off his career here with the Chargers. When I'm looking at the top 250 in ADP, Ladd McConkey is the guy at the top, followed by Hampton, and then Justin Herbert, all of those guys being drafted in the top 30. And then outside of the top 100, Trey Harris, Najee Harris, and Quentin Johnston. And then outside of the top 200, Lambert Smith and Aronde Gadsden. Keenan Allen not on this list. I think maybe just because he was a free agent, the market hasn't reacted to him being re-signed by the Chargers here again. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts here, War, on a few things. Let's talk a little bit about the wide receiver room, because it's guaranteed, in my opinion, that Ladd McConkey is the true, guy that you want to own. But outside of him, they've had a couple guys that they've been trying to throw in and mix in. Lambert Smith has been getting some buzz. Trey Harris was obviously the highly drafted rookie by this regime. Quentin Johnston was a highly drafted rookie by the previous regime. It's kind of been a reclamation project that Jim Harbaugh has been trying to work with. And then Keenan Allen signed as the veteran. How do you think this shakes out behind Ladd McConkey?
Well, I mean, Keenan Allen definitely complicates things a little bit, because not only is he going to, take up touches and take up space, he's going to demand that he does it. So whereas I would be a little bit higher on Trey Harris and other terms of Quentin Johnston, I'm a little less, and Keandre Lambert Smith too. I'm a little less high on him now, because I know Keenan's going to go in and he's going to get his playing time. He's probably going to be, I don't think he's going to threaten Ladd McConkey, but he's definitely gonna probably secure that the opposite side of Ladd McConkey. And so that's gonna leave one of these guys out in the cold. More than likely, probably Quentin Johnston or Lambert Smith. But you never know. Jim Harbaugh, he might say, Trey Harris, you're a rookie. Chill out for a minute. So
yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm looking at this, and I think in 2 wide receiver sets, my guess is it's going to be Ladd McConkey always in those 2 wide receiver sets. And then it's going to be a mix of Keenan plus some of the other guys, depending on what type of routes they're running. 3 wide receiver sets, my guess is Ladd McConkey is going to be playing on the outside, maybe sometimes in the slot, but primarily Keenan will be the slot wide receiver. And then you'll have Trey Harris and QJ on the outsides. If I had to pick today and say, like, hey, the 2 guys that I'm the most confident in projecting long term, it's Ladd and Trey Harris. I think Trey Harris is the long-term answer for the outside wide receiver slot opposite Ladd, and Keenan's the temporary slot wide receiver there, where, in the next couple of drafts, if they want to get another wide receiver, or maybe Keandre develops, or maybe Quentin, develops a little bit more over the next year or 2, then they're comfortable saying, hey, Lambert Smith and Trey are the outside guys, and we're going to move Ladd into the slot. Because I think a lot of people point towards Ladd McConkey and say, white wide receiver, slot wide receiver. I think that's what people point at Ladd and say. But he's proven to be a very, very good outside wide receiver and an inside wide receiver. So I think he can play anywhere. He just gets that like white boy slot wide receiver stereotype. But I think he can play anywhere. I love him as a dynasty asset. I think he's going to be very, very good for a long time. And I think he's the perfect fit in this offense with Jim Harbaugh. Now, the reality is that this offense isn't going to be the most pass-friendly offense. So outside of McConkey, you can't guarantee that a lot of these guys are going to see a ton of targets, because they're going to be running the football a ton. We know that's what Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh want to do. I am going to just shout out before we move on to the running backs, Gadsden, because I think he's very interesting as an athletic tight end. Probably just a taxi squad stash still at this point in time, but I think he's interesting. Probably going to play behind Courtland this year, though, until he develops as a pass blocker and a run blocker at that. Looking at Hampton and Najee, right now, it's tough to project really what's going to happen, because Najee Harris, since the 4th of July, has been dealing with that eye injury. He's since then kind of started to do small things on the practice field, but it's still TBD whether or not he's going to be ready for week 1. If I had to guess, he's probably not going to be ready for week 1. So that sets Omarion Hampton up to be potentially a bell cow early on in the season. He was drafted in the first round of the NFL draft. Outside of Najee, you're looking at a backfield of like Raheem Rocket Sanders, Kamani Vidal, a couple other guys in here. But really, it's Hampton's job now until Najee is back. And even once Najee gets back, it may be too late, because Najee shouldn't have gave him runway anyways to get on the football field. How do you feel about this running back room? I mean, Najee's at running back 51. It feels like he's being thrown away by the dynasty community. And Hampton at RB6, it seems like people are crowning him already as one of the next crowned prince of the running back position.
I mean, you kind of nailed it, to be honest. Going into the offseason, I initially kind of thought very similarly to the J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey situation, where I'm just like, okay, coaching staff's going to roll with the veteran, let the veteran take some of these hits, let the veteran lose some of the tread on his tires, and then bring out the nice new toy play in Omarion Hampton. But now since the injury happened to Najee Harris, now you kind of got to roll with Omarion Hampton. And if he goes out there and he's just like a complete baller, a complete stud, Najee will be holding his bags and fetching him water, on the sidelines. And that's exactly how I see this whole thing shaking out. Yes, Najee does have some value, but I feel like now he's put himself, like you said, he's put himself in a position where he doesn't get to dictate his own future, because initially he probably would have been a starting running back. He could have went out there and just been a complete stud and delayed the inevitable of Omarion Hampton taking over the backfield. But now you're letting Omarion Hampton take over from day one, and you're the one who's going to have to hope that, Omarion slows down a little bit so you can get the touches. So that's where I'm on the running back room.
Yeah, I mean, I was right there with you. I was saying early on, like, hey, pump the brakes on Hampton to start the year, because I think this old regime in Harbaugh and Roman and their old school ground and pound style, like, they are going to have that mentality of the vet gets the first run and the rookie earns his stripes. That's kind of what I thought was going to happen. And it's unfortunate because I feel like for Najee, this was a smash setup for him to kind of prove what he could be as a running back in this NFL that wasn't behind a bad Pittsburgh O-line, that wasn't, in a weird situation in Pittsburgh, because he's been one of the most durable running backs since entering the NFL. He's been very productive. The efficiency numbers are what were in question, but the thought for me was always, well, if he gets behind a better run blocking line and he gets in a better situation here where it's a better offensive scheme, can the efficiencies bounce back? And then we start seeing why Najee Harris was a first-round draft pick. So it was a great situation for him, but it's unfortunate because it's that 4th of July accident. It seems to have derailed all of this. And we don't know much about it, but it's part of it's like, damn, that's just an unfortunate bad luck kind of situation. That might have not even been his fault, but it's just kind of just the way the cards fell. Either way, yeah, freak accident, man. Either way, Hampton has the runway, and that's what it was going to be, is as soon as Hampton starts taking some of that runway, he's going to run away with the job. And it just came sooner rather than later. And honestly, for drafting purposes and for fantasy purposes, I guess probably better for us to know now than to know later in the season. But part of me, and maybe I sound crazy when I say this, and I'm going to ask you your opinion, part of me feels like if I'm looking at a potential player here where I can gain some value, is Najee Harris a player that you would be willing to throw a 3rd-round pick at or 2/3 at and see what happens? Or is it done?
You had me at like 1/3. When you said 2/3, I was just like, yeah, no, that's too much. A third is probably the most I would trade for Najee at this moment in time, to be honest.
Okay, so scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I need the rankings from 1 to 10 on both. Okay. Scale of 1 to 10, your confidence meter that Najee Harris ever finds starting touches again in his career.
1.
No confidence that he's a starter ever again.
No confidence, sir.
Confidence in Najee Harris being a highly valuable handcuff in fantasy again, kind of like a Zach Charbonnet.
I could see that. He still has, some youth on his side. So my confidence level that is more close to like 5.
50-50 chance. Yeah, so it seems like for you, it's like a 50-50 chance that he's a valuable handcuff and a 0% chance, or I guess a 10% chance that he's a starter again. I think I tend to be, him being a valuable handcuff, I tend to be more on like the 6 or 7 there. The starter, I don't think he's probably going to be a starter again. I think this was probably his chance to show that off, and he's not going to get the opportunity to show it off now. So I'm with you. Maybe we'll talk a little bit more about Najee in a little bit. But let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Kansas City Chiefs are projected a win total of 11.5 games this year. Last year, they won 11 games, were the AFC West champions, and went to the Super Bowl. Lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. No coaching changes. In the offseason, they lose DeAndre Hopkins, and they have the additions of Jalen Royals, Rashard Smith, Elijah Mitchell, and Gardner Minshew. Looking at the top 250 in ADP, a couple names have been added to the list since this time last year. You got Mahomes still at the top, followed by Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy. Isaiah Pacheco is here, just rounding out the top 100. You have Kelce rounding out the top 150, followed by Jalen Royals, Rashard Smith, Hollywood Brown, and Noah Gray. I think there's a couple interesting conversations here to be had. Let's start it off with the wide receiver room, though, because Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy are definitely projected the number 1 and the number 2. I'm curious to know kind of your feelings as to how you see this room shaking out. Rice suspension looming, Worthy kind of showcasing some talent at the back end of last year with Rice off of the football field. And then talk about, if you want, any of the guys, Jalen Royals, Hollywood Brown, that you think are valuable in this offense in the wide receiver room.
Hollywood Brown, to me, Hollywood Brown, I'm just going from the bottom up. Hollywood Brown, I'm cool. Jalen Royals, wouldn't mind having him on the taxi. Xavier, the most interesting pieces, honestly, are the top two guys. Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice. I feel like those guys are battling for supremacy as the wide receiver one. Now, Rashee Rice is kind of tricky because not only do we have injury concerns, we have legal concerns. We want to know if Rashee Rice is going to be the guy we seen before the injury, or is he going to come back and be a lesser version of himself? Or is he going to come back and be the same guy, but now Xavier Worthy took a step forward so much that now, that what we thought we were going to get from Rashee Rice is less now because we're getting more on the Xavier Worthy side. I wouldn't mind having both of those pieces on my team. My mind is completely open to the idea of Xavier Worthy being the one to supplant Rashee Rice as the top receiving option there.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation. I'm with you. I think Hollywood is like a best ball play at best, especially if you're going to get weeks where Rice isn't on the football field because of suspension. Royals is interesting. I liked him as a player in the NFL draft. He did not get the draft capital I thought he was going to get, and he landed in a situation where with Rice and Worthy ahead of him, it's going to be hard for him to get some targets early on. But I liked him as a player in that prospect process. Just I don't know if the cards fell favorably for him. Still, like you said, throw him on a taxi and see what happens. When it comes to Rice and Worthy, it's going to be very interesting because I kind of lean, you laid out like all the possible scenarios in which this could fall. If I had to pick one that I lean, I actually do lean a little bit more that Rice has spent time off of the football field. Worthy's been on the football field, growing chemistry with Patrick Mahomes, kind of leveling up a little bit as a wide receiver in the back half of the year last year. And I do think Worthy has earned and will earn enough of a receiving share to diminish some of the returns that you had on Rashee Rice early on last year. I think of that like sample size. You had a little bit of the back half of Rashee's rookie season where obviously there was no Worthy on the football field. And then early on in the year last year when he was performing like that, Worthy was just getting his feet wet. He was just a young pup, trying to get some touches. And so it's interesting to me. I think it is a little bit closer than people want it to be. There's going to be people who think Rashee Rice is the elite top 5 kind of guy that we saw. There's going to be people who think Worthy is just a speed guy like they saw at the NFL Combine. It's a very, very, what is the word that I'm looking for here? Divisive wide receiver room. Like people are going to pick one side or the other. Yeah. People are going to be looking for picking one way or the other. And I don't think a lot of people are acknowledging the fact that it could be both. And I think that's more so likely the answer. When I look at Travis Kelce, I think we're just trying to squeeze as much of that juice out of him before it's done. Like, I think there's just not a ton left in the tank, but we're going to get a decent season from him, I think, this year. I am personally operating, if I have Travis Kelce on my team, I am personally operating as if this is the last dance. Are you?
Yes.
And if that is the case, does Noah Gray intrigue you? Because Noah Gray has flashed at times, or do you think that the next tight end of this team is not on the roster?
I think the next tight end of this team is not on the roster.
Yeah. I kind of agree with that. But I think Kelce has some value still this year. He's still going to get touches. Mahomes not going to not look his way. Speaking of Mahomes, QB6, down year last year. We've talked about Mahomes a little bit this offseason as to potentially being a guy who can bounce back a little bit, snap back to form. Has your opinion on that wavered at all, knowing that Rice could be suffering a mid-season suspension or a late-season suspension? Does that change the way you feel about that at all?
No, because I feel like this is where we're going to get to see if Xavier Worthy, even though we kind of have seen it, if Xavier Worthy could step up and sit on that throne next to the great Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. I kind of agree with that. And I think they have a little bit more ammunition in Royals and a healthy Hollywood, because remember, Hollywood wasn't healthy last year for them, behind Rice now, where you don't have to roll out Justin Watson and Juju Smith-Schuster anymore. You can roll out some of the other guys. So
yeah.
It's going to be interesting. I've been very high on Pacheco as a value pick this offseason. I think he's been undervalued. A lot of people have written him off after the injury last year. Rashard Smith is in this backfield as a lot of people's favorite, dart throw, low-end guy. Also, Kareem Hunt was re-signed. Elijah Mitchell comes over from the San Francisco 49ers. Where are you at on Pacheco going into 2025? And how do you feel about the other guys in the backfield? I guess primarily Rashard Smith, who's sitting here as the running back 68.
I mean, I'm low on Pacheco, but I'm open to the idea, like you've shared on our other videos. I'm open to the idea of him bouncing back from his injury because he was banged up last season. So I am open to that. But for my own expectations, I'm starting him low with the possibility of moving up. But as long as he's low, Brashard Smith will have a shot at unseating him. The Chiefs don't really prioritize high draft capital or high, assets into that running back position. Kareem Hunt, that was just sheer like good scouting and good luck. How they got Kareem Hunt. Same thing with Pacheco. So I mean, who am I to think that Brashard Smith couldn't be the exact same thing? Now they've had some bad luck too, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but that's also because Patrick Mahomes stuck his nose in to where it shouldn't have been. But because of the way the Chiefs operate the running back position, I'm not going to write off Brashard Smith somehow finding his way into either a timeshare or just taking over that backfield altogether.
Yeah, I think Brashard Smith to me is the most interesting because of the traits that he has. Was undervalued, I think, in the NFL draft. You look at the analytic profile, you look at some of the other stuff that he had as a producer over there at SMU. It felt like the Chiefs found a little bit of a diamond in the rough when he landed here. And he's a converted wide receiver who now plays running back. So he's going to have that pass catching and the receiving chops where a guy like Pacheco hasn't necessarily had that. Obviously, Pacheco's been that early down grinder, that guy that they're trusting on the goal line. He's going to get you the dirty yards. But if Brashard Smith starts to use some of that receiver skill set and spells him on third downs, comes in, catches some footballs, it could be an interesting backfield. I think both can have some value. But I just am not buying the Kareem Hunt again being the guy. I thought he looked really inefficient last year when he was given some touches. And I think it's going to be Pacheco and Brashard Smith. And I think they're going to let Pacheco, for better or worse, I think they're going to let him lose the job. It's up to you. And he won the job, obviously, the first time over CEH. And they're going to say, hey, you're in a contract year. Go win the job or lose the job. It's up to you. We're going to let you sink or swim. And that's my bet on Pacheco this year is they give him the opportunity. And I think he just gives you enough to where he never gives that job up. Going into 2026, the contract's up. Do they want to pay him? I don't know if they pay him. But at least 2025, I think he's going to have the opportunity in front of him.
Yeah, I could see that panning out.
All right. I think that is it for this team. Let's just go into our predictions here for the AFC West. As always, folks, we make predictions for breakouts, busts, and sleepers, give you guys the elevator pitch as to why we believe these players are worthy of those titles. War, these are your predictions, so give me the pitch on these predictions for the AFC West.
I think breakouts is Andrew educated me after last week's video. I am comfortably going to say that the breakout candidate for the Chargers is going to be Omarion Hampton, even though he's a rookie. I think
rookies can break out. Rookies can break out.
Yeah, I think everything is in place for him to break out. I think the Najee Harris injury completely opened the window for that to happen. And that's exactly what's going to happen. He was already highly touted, highly sought after in Dynasty drafts. And now things like this happens, injuries happen, and this is usually how guys end up making a name for themselves. My bust, Geno Smith. I just don't see it. I got to see it to believe it, man. Change the scenery, but the more things change, the more things stay the same. Especially with him only having Brock Bowers as his top target in the offense with no guy that can help him take more easier shots. I don't see it for Geno. We'll see. I wouldn't mind being wrong about this, but we'll see. Then Jalen Royals, super sleeper, super duper sleeper here. It would take Rashee Rice getting injured, and it would take Jalen Royals actually going out there and performing. When I say he's a sleeper, the path to success for me is if Rashee Rice gets injured, Xavier Worthy steps into the role that Rashee Rice would have been in as like their top receiver, and then you get those flash games from Jalen Royals like you got from Xavier Worthy last year. And I think
it could happen without the injury if Rice is suspended for a chunk of time.
That's what I meant. I said injury.
You said injured, yeah.
I'm in suspension. I'm sorry. Okay. If he's suspended and that happens, then I could see Jalen Royals stepping into that spot that Xavier Worthy was in last year, where we get some decent games here and there, and I think that will qualify him as a successful sleeper candidate.
Yeah. I totally agree. Like I told you on the last episode, I operate as a guy that breaks out is just a guy who shows up that hasn't showed up for us in fantasy before. A sleeper is a guy that's going deep in drafts and I think can outperform the ADP. So that's the way that I view it. I think both those guys fit the criteria. Now, for my prediction, I didn't want to take Omarion Hampton because you already took him and he's the most obvious breakout candidate to me. So I went with the other rookie running back in RJ Harvey. I think RJ Harvey, more of a second half breakout, but I'm going to take him there to be the breakout candidate for the Denver Broncos. If he gets a little bit of that Alvin Kamara work where he's a receiver, gets some goal line work, some things like that, I think he can be a player that breaks out for fantasy and people are excited about him. And I already told you the range of outcomes for Harvey, where if he does break out and come in and, kind of exceed expectations, he could jump into a tier above where I'm comfortable starting to move off of RJ Harvey. So he would be my selection. My bust, I'll be real, there wasn't a lot of players in this division that I was very comfortable calling a bust because I think there's a lot to like in this division. So I took the low-hanging fruit of Najee Harris. I just don't know how ready he's going to be to start the season. And if he's not playing to start the season, I don't know how involved he's going to be. And he could be a guy that gets cut from the Chargers going into 2026, and has to start it over and go somewhere else. So I think he's a player that is going to end up being my bust. Low-hanging fruit. Hampton, was given the runway too early and he's not going to give it back. That's just my thoughts. The sleeper for me is Dante Thornton Jr. I talked a little bit about being intrigued by him because he's working with the ones, because he's on the outside for Geno, could be on the receiving end of some of the deep ball throws from Geno Smith. We talked about that room being very murky behind Jakobi Meyers, and Jakobi Meyers not really giving you a ton to be super overly excited about. So if anybody has the opportunity here to carve out a role, it's Thornton for me because his skill set is so unique compared to the other guys in the room. Besh is a very similar receiver to a guy like Jakobi. Trey Tucker is mediocre at best. So Thornton to me is just this X wide receiver that's going to be a freak athlete. His RAS scores and the athleticisms are off the charts for a player being his size. Actually, it's funny because it's very similar to a guy like DK Metcalf. So he's the sleeper candidate for me. He's being very overlooked still, I think, at this point in time. Got some buzz early in the offseason, but I like him as the sleeper candidate for me in the AFC West. All right, so that is it for our final division. We love doing these shows. It gives us a chance to talk about every team, every player, all of these guys that are being drafted in the top 250 of Dynasty drafts. I've said this before on these episodes, but this series doesn't usually do well in the algorithm. So if you guys enjoy it and you guys like it, we want to keep doing it every year. Let us know in the comment section down below if you still want to keep seeing it. If you guys don't want to see it, let us know. But if you like it, hit the like button. Tell us in the comment section you like the series, and we'll do it again next year. While you're down there, hit the subscribe button as well. Go join the free Discord. We're doing a pick'em tournament in the Discord this year. $10 to join. You can pick against me in war. All of the NFL games this season. The top 3 teams get League FFB merch, cash prizes, and a chance to play in the Listener League, Subscriber League that we're doing in 2026. So go do that for us. It's going to be a fun time. We're trying to get 50 signups by week 1. We're about halfway there. So let's try and fill the other half in the next couple of weeks as we get to week 1. That said, I have nothing else for you guys today. Ward, do you have anything for the people before we get out of here?
Yes, just the usual spiel I'm gonna give you guys. Come subscribe to us on Crimson Mass Pro Wrestling YouTube channel and subscribe to us on the Crimson Mass Show YouTube channel. We'll really appreciate it.
Hell yeah. All right, you guys are seeing this. I'm in Vegas right now, hopefully kicking Ward's ass in a football draft. So that's where we're at the moment. But we'll see you on the next one. Love you guys. Peace out.